Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down here in the catacombs for the kickoff of Season 5, Rob. Is that correct?
I believe you're right.
Season 5. I noticed you've been busy down here. We've got some new things going on, new lighting, some new camera work going on here this time, I think, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations to you. You know, this is interesting. I was thinking about the torch, which feels kind of warm tonight. It's nice, but it's warm, you know.
Still.
You know, in this little kind of crazy techie world that we live in, it's kind of hard to tell what's fake and what's real. So we want people to know that down here in the catacombs, this is all real. We're not using green screen, because some people have actually suggested that we're using green screen. To make the little, we're going to start tonight with a little experiment, a little demonstration. Well, I just want to show people that this torch, for example, is a genuine catacomb torch. This is not something that's fake or, you know, computer generated. This is torch, this is paper. Ready? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, behold a genuine catacomb torch. Compliments of Rob, our technician and our producer. Thank you, Rob. That's fine.
That was fun.
Done a lot of good work like that down here. The torch is better than ever. You've dolled up. This is important. You've dolled up these guys.
Yeah.
These guys have been dead for a long time, but you've dusted them and cleaned them a little bit. And I don't mind saying, I think they look pretty sharp. But this brings up sort of a season opening concern that I suppose we should just go right ahead and address, and that is the skulls. Because lots of people, not lots, but a fair number of you, you know, they freak out, quite honestly, over the skulls. I guess they think it's some kind of Tales from the Crypt or something evil and weird, or maybe the Remnant's going goth or something. But I think it's very important for people to understand we are down in a catacomb, and this idea that the goths and whatever, is that the right word? Was this group of the youngsters with the
black
skulls and black and all of that? They ripped that right off from the Catholic Church. And so, you know, I'm sure Rob can throw on the screen any number of images, famous images of saints such as Mary Magdalene and so forth, that appear with a skull. There's a beautiful church in Rome that's adorned with skulls and so forth. It's a church that was taken over and constructed, I should say, by people who are responsible for burying the abandoned dead of Rome. And if you go to that church in Rome today, it's unbelievable. Crucifixes, candelabras made of skulls. And so there's a very rich, you know, history of symbolism, if you will, in the Catholic faith that has to do with this idea of the skull. Remember, man, that thou art dust, and unto dust thou shalt return. And this is where it all comes from. So no, we haven't gone over to the dark side or to the goth. We are trying in our own little catacomb down here to sort of pay homage to the old Roman catacombs. And these are places where Christians, of course, went down to have mass, to educate their children sometimes. It was like the original homeschool, the catacombs, to bury their dead, of course. But in essence, to hide out, if you will, sometimes to practice their religion at a time when the ancient pagans of Rome were entertaining themselves by feeding our fathers and mothers in the faith to the lions. So that's what this is all about. The idea is that as Christophobia gets ratcheted up more and more, and I was going to say every year, I would say every day now, we're seeing more indications of coming persecution. Our idea is not to hide out in the catacombs, but rather to come down here and strategize, keep the faith, you know, commit to keeping the old faith no matter what, and at the same time to prepare for battle, which I think obviously what the tradition is, what the early Christians were doing, was steeling themselves in the catacombs to keep the faith no matter what happened. So yeah, we're in solidarity with them in this sort of new catacomb, and at a time of new Christian persecution. So they're getting very bold, and we're all about trying to prepare some sort of Christian counteroffensive, but most importantly, keeping the old faith no matter what happens. So that's the point and purpose of our catacomb. And you know, the thing is too, as we start off this new season, we're not depressed. We're not. The faith is always new. It always fills you with joy, and we're not down here because we're terrified or scared to death. You know that they're going to wipe us out. What are we going to do? They might, but you know what? They've tried before. That's kind of the interesting thing about history. Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. The bad guys don't know it either. So in their plan now to squelch Christianity, to wipe it out, to eradicate it, they don't realize it's not going to work. It's never worked. So when they're coming now to start rounding us up again, you know, maybe threatening persecution, throwing us in prison or whatever, this has all been done before, and all it does to us is prove that all that they did to try to wipe out the faith from our minds and our souls and everything else failed. So now they're just desperate. Well, let's just persecute them. Let's round them up. Let's arrest them. That's where they're at. And it's never worked. So that's kind of the atmosphere, the attitude that we have down here in the catacombs. We want you to join us. We're thrilled that you've joined us already. Spread the word. Rob and I are down in the underground once again every week now, coming for this new season. You can help us out if you want by donating to this little, push on this little button here. Rob, I trust the little button's up there, because sometimes I feel like I'm having an apparition. There's actually nothing up there because Rob gets these videos up so quickly that the team doesn't always remember to put the little pay, or the YouTube pay button or icon up here in time. So there should be a little white globe up here. Click on that and help us out. It really, really would be tremendous, and we're going to continue to use your support to fight as hard as we possibly can. So to the topic of our first show of this new season, I wanted to make a point that I hope will resonate with everyone, with the folks who've been down here with us all along, with the dead folks here behind me, with people who may be brand new to our program and have kind of wondered what are these guys doing down in the catacomb. I wanted to address something right out of the gate, and it's a two-pronged criticism of so-called traditional Catholics, which I quote-unquote identify as, which basically just means we're Catholics. We're trying to hand down the faith, live the faith, and then hand it down to our children exactly as it was handed to us from our grandparents. That constitutes traditional Catholic, therefore that's what we are. But there's this criticism that's leveled against, and I think it's kind of contrary in and of itself. On the one hand, they accuse us of wanting to turn back the clock to the good old days of the 1950s. We're so unrealistic. We want to go back to the 50s. Turn back the clock. Go back. Don't go forward, and all of this sort of thing. Back to the days when the Catholic Church told everybody what to do, when to do, and how to do, and so forth. And never really why to do it, though. Just do it because you're Catholics and you're not supposed to use your brain. That whole thing. Of course, we reject this on its face. If I could do a brief tangent, we have a column at the Remnant newspaper called Lost in the 50s Too, which was written by my father back in the 1950s. And it's a remarkable column because it shows that things were just about as bad back then as they are now. Maybe not quite as bad, not quite as crazy in the streets, but it wasn't utopia. It wasn't Christendom in the 1950s America. So we don't even accept that going back to the 50s would solve the problem anyway. It's just that compared to what we have now, well, the 50s look pretty darn good. In any case, tangent, because they're accusing us of this. They want to turn back the clock. And then in the exact same sentence, they also accuse us, traditional Catholics, of being all about private judgment. We want to have our own church. We want to crown ourselves our own pope and bishops and so forth. So my question is, which is it? Do we want to run the church ourselves, or do we want the church to run us? So to kind of answer both of these things, I want to explain sort of what traditionalism is all about, which again is why we're down here. And I want to use an old friend of ours, quote unquote, Bishop Robert Barron, to help me make this point. If you'll bear with me, it's going to be a little bit prolonged here, but I think it's going to be worth it in the end to show us, before you even bother investing your time, and sometimes in some cases even your money to support us, in this endeavor, this little catacomb endeavor of ours, to have a better understanding of what we're all about. I want to be very clear about that, what we're all about, so that we can all work together. So Bishop Barron, we've even been critical of the bishop down here. Last season, he was interviewed by Dave Rubin, who was a married homosexual man, quote unquote married. And quite frankly, I thought the bishop came up a little bit short in that interview. So I don't think he's a fan of the Underground program. I certainly have had my differences with him. But this time, tonight, I want to talk about something he did more recently, which is the bishop talking about Martin Scorsese's film Silence. And I haven't seen it yet. It's based on a novel about the apostasy of several Jesuit missionaries in Japan. And oddly enough, or maybe not, I don't know, the film debuted in this very strange way. It debuted at the Vatican itself earlier this year, and this was in January. At which time Martin Scorsese, scored a high-profile meeting with the Pope, and he got his film endorsed by the highest authority in the Catholic Church, which I thought, by the way, was a bit problematic, because I don't think Martin Scorsese ever apologized for his sacrilegious and blasphemous film, The Last Temptation of Christ. But in any case, we'll leave that for another program. So in any case, this film tells the story of two Jesuit missionaries who travel to Japan to find out if it's true that their mentor, I think his name is Father Ferreira, if he's actually apostatized, as the rumors suggest. In other words, he's taken on he's left the faith, he's married a Japanese woman, he's become a Buddhist monk, he's really become a real nutter in Japan, this Jesuit priest. So when they arrive in Japan, these two young priests then, who were setting out to find this apostate, The Japanese authorities find out about them, but rather than persecuting the priests right off the bat, they try to find out where they are and to smoke them out by torturing and even killing a lot of the Japanese Christian converts in that community. So this is where I want to use Bishop Barron. He describes how these Japanese Catholics were being killed in order to torment the priests, the young Jesuit priests who had just arrived in that country. So let's just take a look.
Maybe the most affecting scene in the movie, the most memorable for me anyway, is this crucifixion scene. So three of the great leaders of the lay Catholic community in Japan are crucified by the seashore. And then the tide very gradually comes in. And basically in the course of 3 or 4 days, these people are drowned in this really horrific manner. And then when their bodies are taken down, they're burned on the seashore. And for all the world, they look like a Holocaust offered to the Lord. One of the decisive scenes, a real turning point, is when he is brought into the presence now of Father Ferreira, the man that he's come to find. He discovers that all the rumors are true, that Ferreira has, this hero, his Jesuit hero, has in fact gone over to the other side.
Okay, so here we go. The main character now has saved his people by abandoning the faith, which was no big deal in the film because later on, this young Jesuit hears the voice of Jesus actually telling him to do the same thing. Jesus essentially says to him, it's okay, I got this. I died for your pain. Go ahead and walk on my image. And check out how that's explained.
At the end of the interview, Ferreira, again, who was sent as a heroic Jesuit, missionary, says, it just won't take in this country. This country's like a swamp. It won't receive the seed of Christianity. Anyway, Rodriguez continues to resist until finally in this decisive moment, he does cave in. Again, under the pressure of torture and with his people being tortured. And look, just do it and we'll release them. And so in this terrible moment, he does step on the image of Jesus.
Right. So the faith just won't take in the swamp of Japan. The missionaries were right, to walk on the face of Christ, not because they hated Christ, obviously, but because they were trying to save others, which is what a merciful God wants. So the young priest apostatizes, naturally. And then he returns. Not only does he apostatize himself, but he returns year after year to again step on the image of our Lord. And while, by the way, working with the original Jesuit, Father Ferreira, to help the government, to aid and assist the government, keep all Christian symbols out of Japan. Because after all, it's a swamp. Christianity won't take on there anyway. And if it did, people are going to die and be persecuted. So the priests actually help the government remove the Christian symbols, which, by the way, is happening in our own time, but that's for another show. So finally, after a long life of doing this young priest, after again and again walking on the face of Christ, he dies. But something happens at his funeral, at his burial. And his name is Father Rodriguez. Something happens to Father Rodriguez that kind of hints, at least, that his apostasy really wasn't all that bad. And Bishop Barron, again, explains how that went down.
The last scene in the movie, and this is a Scorsese touch, actually, it's not in the novel. The camera actually goes into the coffin, and you see the corpse of Rodriguez holding a little tiny crucifix.
Well, isn't that special? A Catholic priest bearing the indelible mark of holy orders on his soul, denied Christ, got himself a nice little honey, and was probably saved in the end, though, because he had this little cross with him. Don't you get it? He had his little cross all along. And God's going to take that into account. That means everything is cool. It's all kosher. It's all good. Now, the priest's flock, they never saw the little cross. They didn't know. All they saw was this terrible example of an apostate priest. But he had his little cross, which shows that God was with him all along. See, the God of mercy, the God of surprises. He was with him all along. And now Bishop Barron is going to tell us, no doubt, how wonderful that is. Right? Check it out.
But I'll tell you the truth. What was kind of bugging me in the wake of the movie was a lot of the commentary in religious circles, which put a huge stress on this theme of complexity, ambiguity, how difficult, how multivalent faith is, and so on.
Wait a minute. Wait just a minute. Where's he going with this, Rob? Let's have a little bit more here. This is a curveball. Let's check it out.
Here's my problem. I think all this talk about ambiguity and multivalence and difficulty and vacillation and conflict is in service of a cultural elite that likes its Christianity just that way.
What? No, wait. This is getting good. Keep going here, Rob. What's happening? This is great. Keep going.
Now, let me make a little comparison here to make my point. And the comparison is inspired by a certain Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, right? Who had been a soldier. And if you know the Jesuit spirituality, it's a soldier's spirituality. Well, imagine a group of special ops, let's say from our country, who are sent after being highly trained for the mission. They're sent behind enemy lines somewhere. They're met by loyal people on the ground who, at the risk of their own lives, support them in the mission. The people on the ground are eventually captured, but they are faithful. They don't give in. They don't give up the mission, and they're put to death. Then in time, the special ops themselves are captured, tortured, and they give in. They betray the mission. And in fact, in the course of many decades thereafter, they become paid supporters of the enemy. How would we read that? I doubt sincerely anyone's going to say, you know how rich and multivalent and complex their patriotism is.
Ha! Well, you could say that again, Your Excellency. What a great analogy. What's going on here? This sounds pretty darn Catholic to me. But it can't be, right? We're in for a big spoiler for a big fall here in a few minutes. Bishop Barron is going to do a triple gainer off the platform and right into the neo-Catholic kiddie pool of destruction down below, right? This is not going to continue in this vein, at least I can't imagine. But let's find out.
Well, see, I'm afraid that the cultural elite today wants and celebrates the same kind of Christianity. You know, hey, Christianity, that's okay, as long as it's vacillating, unsure, privatized, harmless.
Oh my gosh! Absolutely, Your Excellency. That's exactly what they want. But what about the apostate priests in the movie, the ones we were feeling so sorry for? They were right? Not to allow mere religion to cause the deaths of innocent converts, right? I mean, the God of mercy and all of that, they did the right thing. They saved their lives. There's got to be right. Let's find out.
Now, go to that last scene, because I know people say, oh, well, are you being fair to Rodriguez? He does have that little crucifix in his hand. Yeah, okay. Maybe he was, in some deeply interior way, still a Christian. But again, that's what they like. That's the kind of Christianity they want. Hidden away, private, harmless. So here's what I would say in conclusion. Maybe, okay, a strangled half cheer for Rodriguez's Christianity. But I'll tell you, I'll give a full-throated 3 cheers to those heroic lay people that kept the faith alive over many years and who died a horrific death defending their faith. I know the cultural elite of that time and our time will look down on that as, well, the poor things, God bless them. 3 cheers for them, I say.
Holy cow. I mean, holy cow. He nailed it. Bishop Barron nailed it. You know, folks, did you feel that transition as we were watching this, Bishop Barron? Yeah, at first you had that sinking feeling that we've all grown so used to when it comes to our bishops. Here we go again. They're going to sell out. Father Skeppy is going to apostatize right before our eyes. And then as we continued to watch, suddenly our interest was piqued a little bit by what sounded a little bit like orthodoxy, right? And it was kind of exciting. The pulse rate goes up a little bit. And then there's that feeling as you watch further, that feeling of hope against all hope, that a Catholic bishop was actually going to say the very thing that the world does not want to hear from a Catholic priest anymore, let alone a bishop. And then finally, at the end, Bishop Barron says it. And you're ready to jump out of your chair and hug the man and thank God for him. You know, did you feel that? It's just the voice of the church, not a big deal. It's a little comment on a movie. But we're starving out here for that sort of orthodoxy, for that sort of Catholic response to people who are attacking our church all the time. I think this proves our point that we wanted to use to set the tone for this season's programming. We traditional Catholics don't want to run the church. Don't you see? We don't want to sit in judgment of our shepherds or running around, crepe hanging like some church lady all the time about how weak they are and we don't like this and we don't like that. Do you think any one of us wants to be that way? I got 7 kids to raise. I got my own soul to save. We need our shepherds. We're terrified by the fact that we are now looking into the eyes of a Catholic-less world, a godless world. And the only answer to that is the church, which is hierarchical. We are not the church. I'm not the Pope. I'm not even a priest. Without the hierarchy of the church, what happens to us? Without the shepherds, what happens to the sheep? The problem in all of our lives today as Catholics is that we can no longer trust the shepherds to do the Catholic thing. We don't want it that way. But, ladies and gentlemen, when Bishop Barron, no traditional Catholic, but he obviously still has the faith somewhere, despite everything that's happened to him and happened to our church and the scandals that we've all gone through, Bishop Barron concludes this review as he did. And when he did that, I had tears of joy in my eyes. Because you're thinking to yourself, if they would just do this more often, if they would just do that, if they would just lead, we traditionalist Catholics would follow them to the ends of the earth. They would have no greater defenders on the face of the earth than traditional Catholics, and we could fade. And we could stop calling ourselves traditional Catholics and simply be Catholics again, who could count on orthodoxy from our pulpits, from our priests, from our shepherds, from our Pope. Because what Bishop Barron has essentially done with this simple little review of a movie, what he's actually done, what he's talking about here, is the spirit of Vatican II. You see, this is why Scorsese was invited to the Vatican. This is why the film debuted at the Vatican. Because the Vatican has the same wish, the same sort of Christianity in mind.
I think the cultural elite in Japan that's displayed in the movie, that's what they wanted. See, they wanted a Christianity that was divided and splintered and unsure and vacillating. They wanted that. It served their purpose, which is why they supported Ferreira and Rodriguez for all these decades. Why they gave them, wives and homes and money and jobs and status. They wanted to display that Christianity.
Sound familiar? Hans Kung, Schillebeck's, Charlie Curran, Ronner, Cardinal Subich, Father Martin, Cardinal Casper, Pope Francis. We don't like it any more than you do, but these men all exhibit the very same weak and divided Christianity that Bishop Barron is castigating. Our shepherds are no longer missionaries who want to convert the world. They've expressly abandoned the missionary effort of the church. They've told us, Cardinal Casper has told us, that the church is no longer about bringing non-Catholics back into the fold. Instead, they tell us that God meets every man where he is. The church must do the same. And it's not necessary to be Catholic in order to be saved. No, that's an antiquated notion of the past, the hateful past, that we need to apologize for. Proselytism is solemn nonsense, Pope Francis famously said. No wonder he likes the movie Silence. When he says proselytism is solemn nonsense, what were the missionaries doing other than proselytizing, bringing the faith to those who didn't have it? He says atheists can go to heaven. Okay, well, what happens to an atheist is between God and the atheist. But in general, for the Pope to just come out with a blanket statement, sure, atheists can go to heaven. He knew the message he was sending. You don't have to be a Catholic. You can be an atheist, for heaven's sakes. And on it goes. Gradual apostasy. The subtle and not so subtle, stepping on that same image of Christ that the missionaries in the film were asked to step on in order to save their skins. Stepping on that image of Christ and his church, outside of which, remember, there is no salvation. That's a dogma of the Catholic Church that the men I just mentioned don't believe in anymore. A dogma outside the church, there is no salvation. You tell me, when's the last time you heard your priest in the Novus Ordo or your bishop tell the diocese that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church? It's a laughable prospect at this point. They deny the social kingship of Christ. Like, they didn't even mention it at the Second Vatican Council. They did not even mention the social kingship of Jesus Christ. Too busy were they crafting a new liturgy that would help us Catholics blend with our Protestant friends and not ruffle any non-Catholic feathers. Too busy were they telling us we didn't have to go to Mass on the holy days anymore, just go on the closest Sunday. Too busy wiping out, giving up meat on Friday and those beautiful things that made us Catholic and made us something a little different. Get rid of all of it. Can't you see where this is going, friends? Oh, what's happened to our Catholic Church other than a form of slow apostasy? Look at this, the clerical sex scandal. Look at the Catholic priest now with the image of pedophile stamped on his face. How did that happen? Because they've assaulted the church, they've assaulted the priesthood, they've asked them all to become apostates and walk on the face of Christ. They've asked us all to do that, which is why 80% of us under the age of 50 no longer believe in Christ, in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. No. We traditional Catholics are not interested in starting our own church. That's not the way it works. But we do want our church to become Catholic again. Maybe there's enough of a spark left in some of these men to inspire more of them, more of their brother bishops. I mean, remember, because they're all victims now of a century's worth of modernist brainwashing and diabolical disorientation. Half of us don't even know how to be Catholic anymore. But if they can just be given the grace and the support and the courage to speak Catholic again, and to realize that it's time to stand up and make the Catholic Church Catholic again, we'll follow them. And it will be an answer to our prayers. And stranger things have happened. People say, it's impossible. You're talking about Robert Barron. Are you nuts? I'll get 2 words for you in reply. St. Paul. All things are possible with God. And if we don't believe that, if we don't believe that these men can be given the grace tomorrow, as we saw in this video, to say and do the right thing, if we don't believe they can become given the grace to become Catholic again, well, then I guess we just might as well blow up this catacomb and go home, because there's no point. And we're all on a trajectory to lose the faith. If God can't save his church at his time when he wants to, I have to believe that. And we do believe that with all of our hearts. Thanks, Bishop Barron. We have our differences. God bless you for what you did there. I'm Michael Matt for the Remnant Underground, and we'll see you next week.